Okay, so get this, right? There's this new AI tool out there, and get this, it can take like literally anything, a document, your grocery list, whatever, and turn it into a podcast. Wild, right?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
We're talking about Google's NotebookLM, and for this deep dive, we are diving headfirst into this Reddit discussion on artificial intelligence, and let me tell you, people are going in on this new feature.
Oh, yeah. I saw that thread. Some of the comments are pretty wild.
Yeah, like you got to hear this stuff. But okay, before we get to the good stuff, and trust me, there's a lot. What exactly is NotebookLM? I mean, besides the obvious AI overlord potential we got going on here.
Right, right. Well, I mean, on like a basic level, NotebookLM is kind of like having this super powered research assistant living in your Google Docs, you know?
Okay, yeah.
It can summarize documents for you. It can generate quizzes from them. It can like answer your questions about the material.
Right, right. Like we all do on a Tuesday afternoon.
It's exactly the usual Tuesday stuff. But yeah, no, this podcast generation feature, this is where things get really, really interesting. You know, it's like a really great example of how crazy fast AI is evolving right now. And crucially, how much more accessible it's becoming to, you know, like everyday users.
So what you're saying is no more need for a fancy studio or expensive software, just like upload and go.
Pretty much.
Okay, but tell me more about how this whole podcast from document thing even works.
Yeah, so it's actually surprisingly straightforward, which is, I think, part of what's got everyone so fired up about it, you know? You just feed NotebookLM some kind of document, could be like a research paper, a business proposal, a fictional story, literally anything. And then you just hit generate and boom, it spits out a podcast episode.
Okay, but HOW, like what's actually going on behind the scenes to make that happen?
So at its core, it's all about some very, very sophisticated natural language processing and text-to-speech tech. So basically, these AI models are trained on this massive amount of data, which allows them to actually understand, like, the nuances of human language, right? Everything from, like, basic sentence structure to more complex things like, you know, tone.
So it's not just reading it out loud in like a robot voice.
Oh, no, 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 not even close. We're talking it can create realistic back and forth dialogue. It can add pauses for dramatic effect. I mean, you name it. Some of the examples I've heard coming out of this Reddit thread are shockingly realistic.
Okay, like give me an example. What are people actually using this for? Okay, so you're not going to believe this, but somebody on Reddit, right, they said they use this thing to make a podcast out of their resume.
Really?
I'm not kidding.
Wow. I mean, it does sound kind of wild when you first hear it, but actually, like, when you think about it, in a world of, you know, cover letters and LinkedIn profiles and all that, sending a potential employer, like, a whole podcast?
Yeah.
That's pretty outside the box.
It really is. It's like, here's my life's work, but make it audio drama.
Right.
I kind of love it.
Yeah, it's definitely an attention getter. And the thing is, that's just like scratching the surface, you know? People are using it for all sorts of things. Business plans, research articles. I even saw someone turn their kids' like history project into a whole audio production.
So basically, anytime you'd normally like hand someone a boring old document, you can now just hit them with a podcast.
Pretty much. And that just opens up like a whole world of possibilities. Like think about accessibility for a second. Like, imagine, say, being able to listen to a research paper while you're out on a run, or having some dense financial report, you know, just narrated to you like it's a story.
Okay, that's actually really cool when you put it like that. But I got to ask, right? This all sounds a little too easy, you know? What are the potential downsides here? Because there's got to be a catch, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, there are always going to be complexities when you're talking about new tech, right? Yeah. One concern that I saw come up a lot in that Reddit thread you mentioned was, you know, the potential impact on jobs.
Right. Yeah, that's the robot takeover part of this conversation, yeah.
Right.
Like, are all us podcast producers about to be out of a job?
Well, I mean, it's a valid concern. AI and automation changing the job market is, like, a huge topic, but I think it's important to kind of like take a step back and remember that a lot of times technology creates new opportunities even as it disrupts, you know, existing ones.
So instead of robots are taking our jobs, it's more like robots are changing how we work.
Exactly. Yeah, they think about like the early days of the internet, right? Yeah. Nobody, and I mean nobody, could have predicted the rise of like, you know, bloggers and social media managers and YouTubers. Entire industries just sprung up around this one technology.
Oh, that's a good point.
And a lot of those jobs didn't exist before.
So, okay, so maybe instead of making certain jobs like totally obsolete, NotebookLM just becomes another tool, like in the creative arsenal.
Exactly. And heck, it might even like create new jobs. I mean, you can imagine a need for like, AI audio editors or sound designers who specialize in synthetic voices. Heck, maybe even AI podcast coaches.
An AI coach for my podcast. And now that's a deep dive I'd sign up for.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk about the elephant in the room for a second. How good is the actual audio quality? Like, are we talking like.
That's what's so fascinating. We're not talking about like robotic voices reading from a script here. I mean, these AI models are so advanced, they can pick up on those subtle nuances of human speech, like tone of voice and pacing and everything.
So you're telling me these AI-generated podcasts actually sound engaging? Like they're not just these flat, monotone things?
Let's just say some of the examples people are sharing from NotebookLM, they're having a hard time telling if they're listening to a human or an AI.
Wow. Okay, so it's not just like the words being said, it's the way it's said. That makes it so realistic. That's kind of scary, honestly.
It's definitely impressive.
This is seriously blowing my mind. And like, it sounds like this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, definitely. What are some of the future possibilities? Like what has people in that Reddit thread really buzzing about the future? Well, I mean, I saw some people already like imagining a future where you could just like have totally personalized audio experiences, right? Like imagine just as for instance, listening to a history book. And as it's talking about the different historical figures, the narrator's voice and tone like totally changes to match.
Oh, that'd be so cool. Like, ooh, gravelly voice for Winston Churchill.
Yeah. Exactly. Or how about like a choose your own adventure audiobook, but it's a podcast. So like the story actually changes based on your decisions.
Oh my God. That would be wild.
Right. And that's not even getting into like how this tech could be used in, education, entertainment, even like therapy and stuff. I mean, this is like a whole new way to interact with information, to tell stories. The possibilities are kind of endless.
It's a lot. And like, it all sounds incredible, don't get me wrong, but I got to ask that what if question, right? What if it gets too good?
Yeah.
Like, what if we reach a point where, like you and we can't tell the difference between like a human-made podcast and an AI-generated one?
Oh, man. That's the million-dollar question, right? And it's a big one. It's something that, like, we as a society are going to have to really grapple with, right? I mean, how do we make sure that there's transparency? How do we make sure that human creativity is still valued, in a world where AI can just, like, seemingly replicate it perfectly?
Yeah, it's almost like we need like a whole new set of like ethics around like AI-generated content.
Exactly. And honestly, it's a conversation that thankfully people are already kind of starting to have. But like, one thing is for sure, the future of audio is here. It's happening now. And honestly, it's only a matter of time before this AI-generated content is just like seamlessly integrated into our daily lives, whether we like it or not.
It's a lot to wrap your head around, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But I got to say, like, a part of me is really excited to see where this technology takes us. I mean, who knows? Maybe one day soon, you and I are going to have AI co-hosts on this deep dive.
Now, that would be a podcast episode for the ages.
I know, right? Okay. On that note, I think it's time to wrap up this wild ride of a deep dive. So until next time, keep those ears open and those minds curious, because you never know what amazing things technology might decide to throw at us next.